My name is Candace Dasanna. I am a second-year law student and one of the co-lead managing editors of the Minnesota Journal of International Law. Today, I am speaking with Dr. Stephen Mumme. Dr. Mumme is a leading authority on the 1944 Water Treaty between the United States and Mexico, which we'll be discussing today. Dr. Mumme has authored and co-authored multiple books and many articles on the subject, and has also given talks for the International Boundary and Water Commission, which oversees the implementation of the treaty. He is Emeritus Professor of Political Science at Colorado State University and is also a non-resident research scholar with Rice University's Baker Institute for Political Studies. So just to start off here, could you explain briefly what the 1944 Water Treaty is and what it does?
Okay, so the 1944 Water Treaty is an agreement that was struck in 1944, ratified in 1945, that does many things. And in fact, it could be described as 3 treaties in one, 4 treaties in one, 5 treaties in one. The 1944 Water Treaty allocates the water of the Colorado River and the Rio Grande, and it establishes the terms or the reference for addressing water and watershed issues for the Tijuana River. And so that's what the title of the treaty addresses. However, the 1944 Water Treaty also deals with sanitation along the border, and it provides that the 2 countries will address through the International Boundary and Water Commission, which it creates as an agent to implement the treaty. It provides that the IBWC, the International Boundary and Water Commission, would address and try to solve all transboundary international sanitation problems that would arise along the border. And that was because we have a number of sister cities that are contiguous along the international boundary. So sanitation was, in essence, the 4th part of the agreement. And then the agreement also folds in the administration of all boundary treaties under the authority of the International Boundary and Water Commission. That fact is sometimes missed, but it's a very important component of how we address some of our water problems along the U.S.-Mexico border, particularly issues like flooding, for example. So it is absolutely relevant to thinking about water as well as boundary. And then, of course, I've mentioned the International Boundary and Water Commission. It creates the International Boundary and Water Commission out of the older International Boundary Commission, which was created in 1889. And it endows the IBWC with the authority to interpret the treaty. That's an important factor in understanding its role as the agent of the governments in trying to resolve issues and disputes and concerns that may arise that are relevant to the treaty and how the treaty is understood and applied. So that's what I would say. That's a long-winded way of trying to point out the complexity of this agreement. And let me add a couple more observations. One is that the complexity adds to the durability of the treaty. That is, treaties that are more complicated, address multiple issues, essentially balance one problem against another, and it raises the stakes of trying to change the treaty, because if you're trying to change it because of an issue in one domain, that may then have an adverse effect on on what you're trying to accomplish in another domain. And so it is an incentive to negotiate. In effect, complexity, I think, in general, in international treaties, international law, adds to the incentive to negotiate and to resolve issues diplomatically. And then lastly, very relevant to the US-Mexico situation, is that this treaty, when it was signed in 1944, it was negotiated, signed in 1943, signed 1944, ratified in 1945, is one of the most equitable agreements that the US and Mexico has ever reached. And I will say that categorically, that is true. And that's one reason that it's so fundamental in the U.S.-Mexico relationship. It is an agreement that both countries could see as being advantageous to themselves at the time that it was signed, and there wasn't a sense of being coerced into. There was an urgency to do it, to be sure, but there wasn't a sense of one nation being overly coerced by another nation and being suborned by another nation in reaching these agreements. And that fact is, I think pretty well understood by people who study the treaty.
Do you think, given Mexico's current situation, the drought in northern Mexico, and the difficulties that Mexico has had with fulfilling the water allocations under the treaty, the amount that they owe the U.S. From the Rio Grande, do you think that it's still an equitable treaty?
Oh, yes. I think it is absolutely not an equitable treaty. And the reason I say that is because the shortages on the Rio Grande, while they are very important, et cetera, play out in this larger context of how the treaty is applied across the landscape of the international boundary and its watersheds. And I think the other thing to point to is that the treaty itself, even in its allocation aspects, setting terms of obligation, setting quantitative standards of the volumes of water that need to be produced to satisfy Mexico's obligations to the United States, for example. That said, the treaty allows for interpretation and allows the two countries to address problems that arise, and I think that enables the two countries to then try to reach solutions to problems that may be man-made or may be hydrological and subject to conditions that neither country can control. Absolutely. So in the case of the Rio Grande, for example, the treaty in Article 4 stipulates that that Mexico deliver 1.75 million acre-feet of water over a 5-year cycle, and it mentions the need to provide 350,000 acre-feet of water each year over the 5-year cycle. But it also acknowledges that there may be circumstances of extraordinary drought where the Mexico might be unable to supply that stipulated volume, right? over a 5-year cycle. And it provides, in essence, for the U.S. to allow a forbearance or provide forbearance to Mexico, enabling it to roll over a debt in the first 5-year cycle to the subsequent or second 5-year cycle, with the proviso that all debts would be met at the end of the second cycle. So currently, Mexico is behind by about 60, 65. I haven't looked at the exact figure just in the last couple of days, but it is roughly short something between 700,000 and 900,000 acre feet of water in the final year of a cycle, of the first cycle since 2020. And it's not going to be able to meet that obligation in this this cycle. So it will be asking for forbearance without a doubt next October, when the end of this cycle comes due. That I fully expect to happen. However, you may have seen that there was a recent agreement just several weeks ago in which the Claudia Sheinbaum, the Mexican president, and the Mexican Foreign Ministry, and CONAGUA, the Mexican Water Commission, National Water Agency, agreed to provide a little bit more water, what they could, to provide and or transfer water now existing in international dams to the United States to at least augment the amount of water that would otherwise likely have gone to Texas and to the United States. Just how much water that will be, we don't frankly know, nor was it stipulated in this agreement. What's interesting about this recent agreement is that it essentially is being viewed as an application of Minute 331 that was agreed upon back in November of 2024, and so they haven't written it into a new minute. There's no formal text. This is sort of a gentleman's agreement. In fact, or a gentlewoman's agreement to do what you could, or what Mexico can or believes it can do, to try and provide a little more water for the United States. But it also recognizes that the two countries are dealing with sustained drought, and that's really the gray cloud kind of overshadowing all of this, is what Mother Nature can and actually will provide in the years ahead. And that will require, I think, some rethinking of how the treaty is being interpreted. But let me just wrap up here by saying the treaty is not the obstacle here. The great virtue of this treaty, and I'm a strong advocate of the treaty, as you might suppose, the great virtue of this treaty is that it allows the governments to interpret its terms in perpetuity, and that is so long as the treaty is in force. And what that does, with just a few exceptions, is to give the governments a wide field of latitude in how they want to deal with the terms of the treaty. And so they can interpret. They don't have to rewrite a thing in the text of the treaty. All they have to do is to be clever interpreters of the treaty and to find ways in the short run or medium term or even in the longer term to say, well, we're confronting some unique challenges, and under these circumstances, the treaty allows us to reach agreements that address those challenges. And so the problem is not the treaty. The problem is simply getting the governments to an agreement, getting the governments on page to identify what the challenge is, to agree on how that expresses itself, and then to creatively find ways of addressing that in the short, medium, and longer term if necessary.
Well, that is something I wanted to ask you about specifically, was if the treaty would have to be potentially amended to change the water allocations, given the change in circumstances caused by global warming and drought and that sort of thing. You're saying the treaty doesn't have to be changed. It's just that we can reach agreements between the two countries to interpret the treaty in a different way. So my question would be, what would be the solution for the water allocations if Mexico is still unable to, if Mexico continues to be unable to pay the water debts over a long period of time? I know it had a great difficulty paying all the water to the U.S. That was allocated in 2020, yeah, the last 5-year cycle, and in the past as well in 2002. So I'm wondering, going forward, what would you see as a good solution for that?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned 202, because the key thing for people to understand here is this is a longstanding issue in the Rio Grande Basin. And it really goes back to 1997, when Mexico missed a first target for the very first time in the implementation of the treaty, missed a first cycle obligation. And then, to make matters worse, it missed its second cycle obligation. So our current crisis is nowhere near as severe as it was in 2002. And I always like to make that point. And now it is a crisis and it is a problem, and that it doesn't. I don't mean to diminish the severity of the water shortages that are being felt on the river. But the treaty provides for interpretation, and what I think this ongoing, really 30-year plus drought that has affected the entire border region, it's affected the Colorado River just as it's affected the Rio Grande River. There isn't anywhere along the border that has not felt the specter of drought over the last 35 years. And so we're in a period of long, protracted drought. That's not even up for debate. That's an incontrovertible reality. Now, just how that's going to play out in the future, we don't know, etc. But here's what we do know: we do know that Mexico has been unable, for various reasons, to provide an adequate amount of water, at least the stipulated amount of water required by the treaty, to Texas, to the United States, and that problem has sprung up repeatedly over this period since 1997 to the present day. Now, at times, Mexico has met its obligation, but of course, we're in the period from 2015 to 2020. We came very perilously close to Mexico not meeting that its obligation, and we're sort of back in the same box now as we proceed towards the end of a 5-year cycle. So what I think and what I've written recently is that the focus of negotiations now needs to shift towards an emphasis on reliability of flows as opposed to the actual quantity of water that is promised. You don't have to change that quantity figure, which remains a legal obligation and also remains an aspiration. That is and in a world of protracted drought, to the extent that drought is part of the explanation for why Mexico is unable to deliver as much water to the United States, and I think that's real, then in this kind of circumstance, it makes sense to look at how you can meet the actual needs of water users. And I think both countries are going to have to take a hit here. I think Mexico is going to have to basically make a firm commitment to deliver a certain amount of water to the United States. I think U.S. water users in Texas, and this will not be popular, are going to have to themselves contend with the reality of receiving somewhat less of a quantity of water than the treaty allows.
Do you think that's something that could be enforced? I know in 2020, the Mexican government tried to release some of the waters from, I believe, one of their dams in Chihuahua, I think it was, and the local farmers prevented that. I don't think, I know the National Guard was called in, and Mexican authorities tried to release that water, but they were unable to, just given the pushback from the farmers. Do you think that would happen more and more if the federal government in Mexico did try to provide Texas with the water and maybe deprive their own population of water needed for farming?
Well, it's going to be on, water managing a water shortage anywhere in the world, in any political circumstance, is going to be controversial and it's going to be painful, without a doubt. And that's why I think both countries have to take a hit here. But the focus should be on attaching that to the conditions of the drought. And saying, look, from the Mexican point of view, we think we can provide this amount of water. We'll negotiate it with you. We're trying to reach an optimal, level of water supply that we can provide over perhaps a 2 to 3, maybe 4-year period, maybe 5 years, to conform to the standard cycle as specified in the treaty. But during this period of time, because of extraordinary drought and the mutually recognized drought crisis, we will be delivering less water, but we will commit to delivering that amount of water for this fixed amount of time. And then at that point, when that is done, and that whatever that time frame that's negotiated would be terminates, then we will look at it again and see if we need to continue that kind of routine, or whether we can revert to the treaty, the implementation of the full treaty provisions as established in the treaty. And so the idea here is that you have an emergency circumstance. You're making you're you're interpreting the treaty to allow an exception to that circumstance, to deal with that crisis. And then that allows a reliable flow, not as much water, but a reliable flow that allows tax farmers and water users to plan their crops, to deal with the banks, to engage in business activities as they would like to do, as they need to do, and so I think we get hung up under the current circumstances of drought. We kind of get hung up a little too much on the quantity, and really need to reset to focus on the maximum reliability, and that would need to be negotiated. But I think it can be negotiated, and it doesn't have to change the understanding that this only applies in an extreme circumstance. If Mother Nature should cooperate, if the dam should be filled to maximum, then you reset the clock and you start again. But the treaty allows for this kind of adaptation, and that I think is part of the strength of the treaty. It doesn't prevent the governments from doing something like that in order to better meet the needs of the moment. And in the longer run, I think we continue doing in recent agreements, 331 in November 2024, basically carried forward approaches that were originally developed in 202 and in minute 308 that basically focus on better water management, on making investments in water efficiency, and trying to advance our ability to conserve water throughout the region. And the focus then was on Mexico in 202. More recently, however, the shift, I think that, and this is a very constructive shift in thinking, we're seeing the countries and particularly the United States recognize that not only does Mexico need to do a better job conserving water and making water available for treaty functions, but the U.S. needs to do a better job conserving and utilizing its own water, because if you're going to deal with scarcity, you have to deal with the totality of the affected parties, and that plays out in a binational circumstance whereby both Mexican farmers, Mexican water users, U.S. farmers, U.S. water users are all recognizing the need to do a better job conserving water in order to make the most efficient use of the water that you can rely on for purposes of treaty fulfillment. And so I think that's I think what we need to do, and that's actually what is being done. And it's the progress maybe isn't as quick or as rapid as a lot of people would like, but we are making headway in that direction. Now, one of the things, let me add this just to kind of put a finer point on it, and that is we're much more advanced in shortage sharing on the Colorado River. We began to share shortages on the Colorado River in 2012 in minute 319, and that came after several years of trying to cope with not just with drought, but also with a terrible earthquake in the Mexicali Valley that destroyed the infrastructure in the Mexicali Valley, such that Mexico couldn't use its allocated water on the Colorado River and needed to store it in U.S. dams upstream. That became an incentive structure for the U.S. and Mexico to enter into mutually agreeable shortage sharing arrangements. And Mexico did not have to share shortages with the United States. The treaty, just like the Rio Grande Article 4 agreement in the treaty, stipulates that the U.S. is to get 1.75 million acre feet every 5 years on the Colorado River. It's Article 10 stipulates that Mexico gets 1.5 million acre feet every year on the Colorado River, making it effectively the number one water rights holder on the Colorado River. Mexico did not have to make a concession to share water shortages with the United States, but it did in 2012. That's exactly what hasn't happened on the Rio Grande. So it's important to compare the two. We're now in a situation where that 2012 agreement was then renewed for a period of nearly 8 years in 2017, minute 323, and it's up for renegotiation in 2026. That is, it vacates in 2026, and there'll need to be a further agreement in 2026. The seven Colorado River Basin states really need Mexico's cooperation, and there's every reason to suppose Mexico will cooperate. But for that very reason, we have this example of trying to share shortages in a context of less precipitation in the Colorado River Basin, and there's even a formal acknowledgement of climate change in these recent agreements on the Colorado River. So they're basically saying we're all together. We've got a common problem, a common enemy, and that's Mother Nature. That hasn't happened yet on the Rio Grande. We don't have that kind of recognition on the Rio Grande. And the reason for it is very clear. Acknowledging climate change as a factor, as one of the causes of the current problem on the Rio Grande would seem to give Mexico a little bit more leverage in dealing with the United States. But we have to get past that. We have to get past that because it's real. And you can debate, and I think one of the other very positive things that came out of the Colorado River agreements was inviting Mexico in to understand U.S. water operations completely on the Colorado River. We're moving in that direction in the Rio Grande as well, and where Texas water managers have greater access and understanding of what's going on in Mexico. Mexicans have greater understanding of what the problems are in the U.S. This move towards greater transparency and fact-finding and a common understanding of the predicament is essential to long-term solutions. And so we have the Colorado River situation as an example. It's not transitive, by the way, to the solutions on the Colorado are definitely not transitive to the Rio Grande, nor vice versa. But that, in the context of international law, in the context of just pragmatic thinking about the situation along the border, I think is suggestive, and it does point to how you might proceed in the Rio Grande and dealing with these problems in the Rio Grande River. So that's one reason I'm somewhat optimistic about the situation. As dire as it seems, We have the flexible tools. We're making progress toward better understanding what our water problems are. And it's in the interest of both countries for the sustainable use of water resources as they exist in the present and in the future, to be transparent, to share information, and to try and arrive at mutually agreeable solutions that serve the interests of citizens in both countries.
Well, thank you so much for being willing to talk to me today. I really appreciate it. It's been a great privilege speaking to you and very educational as well.